Girls, the clock is about to strike. Let's hurry to the table. Adriana exclaimed loudly enough to get her friend's attention, but no one heard her. She looked towards the balcony door, which was slightly ajar, where the festive noise of the capital could be heard. Agata and Nuria were watching this mesmerizing scene from the 9th floor. Adriana repeated her words louder, and the girls shouted in unison. Coming. The owner of the luxurious apartment in an elite residential complex was used to having all her wishes fulfilled instantly, but her friends were showing clear disobedience, so she impatiently shrugged her shoulders as if trying to shake off something unpleasant and disgusting. They behave like teenage girls, and they try to portray themselves as the best part of our society, Adriana, who was used to considering herself part of the elite since childhood, said. Her upbringing played a significant role in shaping such a worldview, as her father was quite wealthy. The host impatiently tapped her finger on the glass, and the friends rushed into the spacious room, where everything sparkled and glimmered. The space was filled with anticipation of miracles in the richly furnished living room, but the most festive thing was in the eyes of the young women. Adriana, don't be such a bore on New Year's Eve. Today we have to sing and have fun until we drop. Nuria laughed and added, Agata, you said it wrong, we will drink and have fun. Adriana smiled indulgently. I won't allow you to drink until you drop, because real ladies should not lose their human appearance. Nuria hugged her friend's shoulders and shook her. Come on, let us have some fun. It's not fair and even cruel of you to frame us like this. We must all go to the Christmas tree, where people are celebrating, in this magical night. Adriana closed the balcony door. She looked at her friends' happy faces, but completely different emotions were raging in her heart. She forced a smile. Girls, come on, seriously, why are you acting like little kids? Why do we need to go to the Christmas tree when we can sit here perfectly fine and talk? I can't stand these mass gatherings full of drunkards and shouting women. Agata ignored the hostess' remarks. She looked at the huge panel that was a stylized version of a chronometer. While you argue, time flies, she said. Nuria and Adriana simultaneously looked at the clock. The unknown designer of this work of art decided to make the dial out of the sun, which had spread out like a huge ball over the green valley with a river and toy houses. This picture of summer idol attracted the attention, and now the three women were under the illusion created by the artist. It became so quiet that the ticking of the hands was distinctly audible. Agata was the first to come to her senses. There's only a minute left, open the champagne. Adriana, did you prepare pencils and pieces of paper? Why? The hostess gave the table a scrutinizing look. Nuria had already grabbed the chubby bottle of sparkling wine. Don't be silly, we're going to make wishes, didn't you forget? Agata replied. Right, girls, everything will be tip-top now, Adriana said as she hurried to an elegant hero made of red wood, and 3 pens appeared on the table a second later. The paper is in front of you, you can make your wishes. The first chimes burst into the room. Agata and Nuria squealed and hastily scribbled on the disobedient paper. Adriana watched her friends with the same condescending smile. Nuria was the first to complete the task. With a light movement, she uncorked the bottle and filled the glasses. Together with the 12th stroke, the 3 women took a sip of their glasses. We have to drink it all, otherwise the wish won't come true, Agata demonstrated an empty glass. Adriana gave her friend a cold look. All of this is nonsense, childish games. One idiot came up with this ritual, and others repeated, stupid and dull. Nuria cautiously pushed the empty glass away from herself. Adriana, today is such a wonderful holiday, we want to have joy and fun, you can't walk around with a sour face forever and lecture everyone. If you don't like this tradition, no one is forcing you to follow it. But Agata and I are thrilled about it. You always said that we should respect other people's opinions, or did you mean only your own opinion? Adriana realized that she had said too much and tried to fix her mistake. Why are you paying attention to my grumbling? You know I can be a nag sometimes. Better share the secret of what you wished for. Agata widened her eyes. You can't reveal secrets, otherwise the wish won't come true, she said. Nuria refilled the glasses again. But I'll tell you. We all know it's just a fun element of the game, but it's still nice to live with hope. Every year, I write just 5 words, I want to get married. But up there, where they register our wishes, they always put me at the end of the line. The year passes, and my appeal remains unanswered. The girl looked at the chandelier and wagged her finger as if the crystal lamp was to blame for her personal life being unsettled. Adriana looked at her friend with interest. Interesting interpretation, by the way, and it explains why I refuse to indulge in such stuff. Agata actively used her fork, but that didn't stop her from interjecting at the right moment. Your salad turned out to be delicious. Did you make it yourself or? Adriana interrupted her friend. I made everything on this table myself. I really wanted to get your approval. Agata smirked. Well done. And speaking of boys, Adriana, why did you suddenly decide to revive our girly traditions? If I'm not mistaken, you have not only this gorgeous apartment at your disposal, but also a famous husband, an even more famous father-in-law, and a whole box of other privileges. Did you really leave them alone on such a holiday just to meet with old friends? This question caught the woman off guard. She started fiddling with the glass filled with champagne in her hands. It just happened spontaneously, you know, sometimes everything in life changes in an instant. Yeah, like on New Year's Eve it was one way, and then the chimes went ba-bam, and everything changed, Agata said. Adriana nodded her head. Exactly, Agata. The boundary between the present and the past life is invisible, but to cross this line. Why all these useless words? Just tell us honestly, did your hockey player cheat on you? Did he find someone else? Adriana struggled to find the right words. No, there's a completely different reason. You see, girls, it's very complicated. Jorge left professional sports, he got sick, and I'm not ready for those kinds of challenges. I tried, but I just can't handle it. Adriana tried to sound convincing, but her voice betrayed her indifference. Agata dropped her fork, which clattered loudly on her plate. What do you mean you're not ready? Adriana had already regained her composure after a moment of confusion. Well, it's very simple. When I got married, I didn't think I would have to hold my husband's hand when he goes to the bathroom, wash him, and change his sheets. Sorry for the details, but you asked for it. So when you were living the high life, indulging in chocolate-covered cream puffs, everything was fine. You thought your whole life would consist of just pleasant moments? Agata retorted. As if you think any differently, Adriana replied defensively. A decent man should take care of his woman. To be fair, Jorge managed to do that for more than 7 years, but now, in addition to health problems, he's facing financial difficulties. And you got scared? Agata asked incredulously. Yes, I got scared. And what's wrong with that? I'm a normal woman, not a nurse. I need a healthy man, Adriana replied. Nuria decisively stood up from the table. We got another ruined New Year's Eve. Let's go, Agata, we'll go to the Christmas tree, and then we'll crash at my place. Even though we're not used to truffles and lobsters, we'll find a decent snack. Agata followed her friend. Thanks, Adriana, but we're better off leaving. We're not the right company for you. The friends hurried to leave Adriana's apartment, who watched them leave with a malicious gaze. Go ahead, you hypocrites. You pretend to be models of virtue, but you'll sell yourselves for an extra 100. They heard the elevator go up. Before getting into the car, Nuria said disappointedly, Adriana, you are used to measure everyone by your own standards, but besides money, there are other values in life. Goodbye. The automatic doors closed almost silently, and Adriana remained standing on the landing. It was a holiday outside, but she felt mournful. The clock showed 2:15. Oh God, what a bad start to this year. And why did I invite those fools over? I'll fix it all now. Adriana feverishly searched her phone for a definite number. Silvio? Happy New Year to you. Are you not bored there? Oh, good to hear. Okay, I agree to be your snow maiden for tonight. Wait for me. Adriana had long noticed that her former friend Jorge had feelings for her. The men used to play together, but Silvio was unlucky and didn't win the happy draw, so he openly envied her husband's successes. The former friend even wanted to hurt Jorge, but there was never a good opportunity. Now he hinted at this circumstance, and Adriana replied, "Silvio, I promise to give you the chance you've been waiting for. I hope you understand what I mean." A satisfied laughter of the man was heard, and he whispered, "Can't wait to see you." The mood instantly lifted up to the desired level. Adriana valued most those who openly admired her. She examined her reflection in the mirror, adjusted her tight-fitting dress that suited her perfect figure. Why not? How long can one be alone? I am a full of life and very beautiful woman. I also need to shake off stress, and Silvio is a very pleasant man who deserves female warmth. Adriana draped a mink coat over her shoulders and headed towards the elevator. Xavier could not get used to the deafening silence that had settled in his huge house for many months. When the successful businessman built this mansion, he dreamed that he and his wife would have at least 3 children who would later give them grandchildren, but Natalia was horrified at the prospect of being a mother of many children. She told her husband many times, "Xavier, come down to earth, look around, we need to get Jorge back on his feet." Indeed, at that time, it was an uneasy time, but the former leader was well aware of the changes happening around him. "Natalia, these are all temporary phenomena. Believe me, it will only take a few years, and everything will fall into place. I know what I'm talking about, and I know I can provide for my family." But it didn't stop the woman. "Xavier, you are not taking my interests into account. I have to defend my thesis soon, and I have no intention of stopping there, so maternity leave is not part of my plans." Natalia was moving step by step towards her main goal, but for her, family was a secondary factor on this path, so Jorge was practically under the care of nannies and governesses from birth. When the boy grew up, the family moved to a new apartment, almost in the heart of the capital. By that time, social groups had already clearly formed in the country, and Xavier sincerely rejoiced that he was on the top rung of this ladder. But he didn't boast about his high position. On the contrary, he loved to spend time in good male company. His wife often hinted that a person with his status needed to be more responsible in choosing friends. He always replied to these remarks, "I have never been a snob, and I have no intention of becoming one. You always have to remain human. There's one thing that surprises me, how quickly a part of our society has changed." "What do you mean?" "I doubt I'm talking about you. As far as I know, there were no counts in your family, but you behave as if blue blood flows in your veins." Such reasoning angered Natalia, but she didn't want to resemble her husband and kept silent. Perhaps it was precisely the lack of understanding that became the reason for the fact that with each passing day, the spouses became more and more distant from each other. But if the parents did not want to admit it, Jorge painfully perceived the rift in the family. Many times the teenager tried to reason with his parents, but they did not listen to him, so Natalia's departure abroad was the expected finale of a years-long confrontation. This happened just on the eve of the New Year's. Natalia was so excited, so it confused Xavier. "Natalia, if I didn't know you, I would think that you were taking some kind of drugs. What is causing your unbridled joy? You are practically bursting with energy." The woman hugged and kissed her husband right in front of their son, although she had never allowed herself such liberties in his presence before. "Xavier, I'm really bursting with joy. I've been working towards this day for so many years, and it's finally come. I wanted to keep it a secret, but since you noticed, I'll confess." The woman made an expressive pause, and Xavier felt his heart beating wildly. But despite his excitement, he tried to turn everything into a joke because he could see the anxiety with which their son was watching them. "Just don't tell me you decided to rob a bank or a jewelry store on New Year's." The woman winced in disgust. "Well, as always, you ruined everything with you being sarcastic," Natalia said, tapping her fingers on the table as if she were dealing with students, not close relatives. Jorge interrupted the conversation of the adults. Mom, Dad didn't mean to offend you, you just didn't get it right. I see you have conspired, Natalia said. Well, maybe it's for the best. You two will make a great team while I'm away. Jorge froze, and Xavier asked sharply, Where are you going this time, Natalia? Don't be sarcastic, Xavier. I got lucky, and I don't want to miss my chance. As part of a partnership with the European educational community, I'm going for an internship in Austria. And you couldn't have warned us earlier? Xavier retorted. Why bother? We've all been living our own lives for a long time now. You and Jorge won't even notice my absence. Besides, our son is already a fully independent person and doesn't need a nanny, Natalia replied. Xavier couldn't help but needle his wife. It's funny to hear that from you because you never burdened yourself with extra cares. Science has always been more important to you than family. Natalia philosophically noted. Sometimes you have to sacrifice the most precious thing, but what can you do? That's life. You should be happy for me instead. Well, it won't last long because the internship is only for 2 years, Natalia said, as Xavier and their son saw her off at the airport. The Christmas tree was still up in the center of the building, and arriving passengers happily took photos with the figure of Santa Claus in the festive atmosphere. Natalia constantly looked at her watch, visibly impatient to leave the country, so the farewell was brief and cold. The woman leaned on her son's shoulder, who has grown up. Son, take care of your dad and come to visit me in the summer. I'll arrange a visa for you. Xavier remembered his wife's smile and thought, that's how people smile when they've gotten rid of something unnecessary. At that moment, he realized that his wife was leaving his life forever, but he didn't say anything to his son about his suspicions. Less than a year later, Xavier received notification in the mail that his wife had filed for divorce. He felt humiliated and offended. Trying to manage his emotions, Xavier called his wife. Natalia called every week to check on their son's affairs, but she was no longer interested in her husband. The businessman never called her first, so the woman on the other end of Europe was very surprised. Xavier, has something happened? Natalia asked. Do you have the decency to ask? He replied. Don't shout at me, explain what happened. No, you explain to me, please, what does the message I received mean? Oh, you're talking about the documents. I didn't think you'd get them so quickly. Imagine that, I did get them. You could have warned me, at least called. Xavier, you know that it's very expensive. The man interrupted his wife irritably. Natalia, that's not a very good excuse. Are you really so tight on money that you can't call your husband? Did I offend you so much that you don't think it's necessary to discuss this issue on the phone? I never thought you'd stoop so low. Well, it's your business, but as for the divorce, don't worry, I've already given instructions to my lawyer, and he'll prepare all the papers. There was silence on the other end of the line, but Xavier could sense what his wife was thinking even on a distance. To prolong his torment, he remained silent and won this showdown. It was clear from Natalia's deep sigh that she gave up. Xavier, you're so calm about this. Why don't you ask why I decided to take this step? To be honest with you, I don't care. We haven't been a family for a long time, so I'm not interested in your personal life. Really? Did you think I'd cry and beg you to stay? But we have a son. Oh, how we talked. Jorge is almost 16, and he's free to seek out his own destiny. But you could talk to him and ask him to move in with me. Don't even think about it. I'm going to let him decide for himself who he wants to stay with. Jorge chose his father, but for years he lived with a heavy burden on his soul and couldn't understand why his mother had treated him so cruelly. Soon after that fateful conversation with her husband, the woman called her son and told him that she was marrying her Austrian colleague, but Jorge didn't even let his mother finish her talk and hung up the phone. Several months later, Xavier learned about this phone call, and since then, by an unwritten agreement, father and son never spoke about their mother. Xavier sat in front of the fireplace, and the peaceful crackling of the fire lulled him to sleep. The long Christmas vacation was a pleasant addition to the extreme conditions of life, but on the other hand, it was also very numbing. In the near future, he had to solve a whole pile of accumulated problems in the company, but his main concern was his son. He felt guilty for what had happened to him, because movies and TV reports don't tell you what professional athletes pay for their success. Yes, everything has a downside. One must pay for everything, Xavier voiced aloud the thought that had been bothering him most lately. He stirred the logs in the fireplace and decided to check on his son, but he hadn't taken a few steps when he heard a noise. Sleepiness was instantly swept away, and Xavier almost ran to the opposite part of the building where his son's room was. "Jorge, what happened?" Loud sounds, resembling the sound of a heavy object hitting something, repeated again, and then Flora's cry was heard. "Leo, Max, where are you?" Xavier felt a chill inside him, and his imagination immediately began to paint the most frightening pictures. He ran into his son's room and almost fell over Flora. This woman had worked in the businessman's house for almost 15 years. She was in charge of accounting and personnel. Thanks to her skilled work, the owner and his son were surrounded by real domestic comfort. "Xavier, you almost knocked me over. These idlers are nowhere to be found. I would advise you to look for other security guards." Flora gave out all these recommendations in passing, while she tried to lift Jorge. The young man was lying on the floor. He was pale, but from his rapid breathing, the father understood that he was alive. The man rushed to his son. "Jorge, what happened to you? Get up." The housekeeper reassured the owner. "Don't worry, he'll regain his consciousness in a moment. At first, I didn't understand what had happened when I heard the crash." Apparently, Jorge decided to take a walk on his own, but overestimated his strength and fell. Flora gestured to the scattered crutches. "Should we call an ambulance?" Jorge objected. "No need for an ambulance. I already feel sick of these people in white coats." The woman rolled an invalid chair to the young man's fall spot, and Xavier helped him up. "Jorge, why are you doing this? The doctor told you not to." "Dad, I don't know who is right anymore. Some say that every movement is harmful to me, others, on the contrary, advise me to be more active. And I, can't come to terms with my helplessness. And don't try to calm me down." Xavier raised his voice so much that Flora flinched. "Stop being hysterical, be a man. Yes, something happened to you, but that doesn't mean life is over." Jorge looked at his father in surprise, and he continued. "Even without doctors, I'll tell you that you can't give up. You have to believe in yourself. There are so many examples when doctors gave a gloomy forecast, but a person, against all odds, got back on his feet. Dad, such cases are rare. I could take an example from those brave men, but my diagnosis is completely different. I know you have multiple sclerosis, but people with this condition live, work, and even have children." Jorge laughed hysterically. "Dad, are you intentionally trying to hurt me? You know perfectly well that Adriana and I broke up, or more precisely, she dumped me. So what? The world hasn't converged wedge on her. Let her go wherever she wants to." Loud footsteps were heard in the corridor, and Flora commented, "Look who is coming." One of the guards apologized. "We only left with Leo for a minute." Xavier looked the stout man up and down with a stern gaze. "You will now have a lot of free time. You're fired, and your friend Leo too, you can tell him." "But Xavier, I need reliable assistance, not loafers. Goodbye." The guard just stood there in the doorway. Jorge decided to speak up for the guys. "Dad, the guys have nothing to do with this. I brought them along so they wouldn't follow my every step. And really, I don't understand why I need this kind of escort if I can't leave the house. According to the terms of the contract, these goons were supposed to provide you with walks and trips to the city. I mistakenly thought that in the company of young and strong guys, you would be comfortable." Flora shook her head. "Jorge doesn't need the company of muscleheads. He needs a good caregiver." The businessman looked at his assistant with interest. "Perhaps you're right. How did I not think of that before? Jorge tried to stand up, but couldn't. He angrily hit the armrest of his chair. What annoys me the most is that everyone is discussing the details of my life, but they don't ask me anything. And now this. Of course, I need a caregiver. That is just what I was missing. I feel deadly sick right now, and you, Dad, are trying to convince me that I have a future. Jorge turned his armchair around forcefully. That's it, the show's over, I need to be alone. All the visitors, including Xavier himself, hurriedly left Jorge's room. Alone with his thoughts, the young man in a frenzy began hitting the armrest with his fists. Why, what am I being punished for? Despite his constant busyness, Xavier always tried to maintain a healthy lifestyle. He had taught his son this from childhood. Since Natalia didn't have time to raise Jorge, he decided to take care of it himself. The boy attended high school, and the physical education teacher immediately appreciated the child's good physical shape. Your son has excellent reaction and coordination. Xavier, I would advise you to show the boy to a children's team coach. We are short in people in hockey today, so talented kids are very much needed. The teacher himself called his friend, who coached a children's team, and he arranged a meeting. The boy liked everything right away, the uniform, the real sticks, and the guys. While his father was talking to the coach, he had already managed to meet everyone. Then Jorge enthusiastically told his father, Dad, you can't even imagine that these boys have been playing for 2 whole years. They even went to the big puck tournament and won there. Do you want to be on their team? Why are you asking? I just used to think that you had to grow up first to play hockey. I also think you're still too young for this kind of sport. If your mother finds out, she'll be in shock, as hockey is a dangerous activity. Jorge grabbed his father's hand and looked at him pleadingly. Dad, let's not tell Mom, let it be our secret. And then, when I get a medal, we'll tell her everything, and she won't be angry. Xavier knew he shouldn't agree with this. Son, you know that lying is bad. Dad, we won't lie, we just won't tell Mom. She doesn't even know we came here to join the section. Yes, son, she's not really interested in what you does in his free time now, as she's preparing for her defense. So Natalia remained unaware for a long time of what Jorge was doing in his free time. Twice a week, the businessman took his little son to the section. After the workouts, the boy was full of emotions. Today the coach praised me, said I'll make a great forward. Congratulations, but you know that in any field, perseverance is necessary. Yes, Dad, Giorgio told us that hard work and only hard work can turn a slacker into a master. The man laughed heartily. Your coach is great. Do you even know what the word slacker means? Our teacher constantly calls us that, she says. The whole class is filled with slackers. Jorge humorously imitated his teacher, and Xavier couldn't help but laugh. One day, after training, his son announced, Now I have a real friend, his name is Silvio. But it's bad that he goes to another school. Does this circumstance hinder true friendship? The boy shrugged. I don't know, but Silvio said that I'm lucky because I go to a gymnasium, and he has to go to a regular school because his dad works at a factory. What nonsense. Remember, son, it's not the job that gives you status, but how you do your job. Look at yourself, for example. If you persistently train, you'll be accepted onto the junior team, and eventually you'll play in adult hockey and compete in championships. Awesome. Absolutely awesome. Your mother and I will be proud of your achievements. The boy sighed. But when will that be? It feels like such a long wait. Remember the words of your coach, Giorgio. By the way, your friend Silvio can also have a great career if he works hard. Jorge brightened up. Awesome, I'll definitely tell him at the next training. He gets nervous when things don't go his way. But while Jorge found everything easy, Silvio struggled with the difficulties of competitive sports. He tried to imitate his friend in everything, but this didn't help him reach the high level that Jorge had already achieved. Giorgio felt sorry for the boy and encouraged him in everything he did. One day, the higher-ups arrived right in the middle of the training. "Come on, Giorgio, show off your achievements." The coach arranged a demonstration tournament for the guests, but purposely assigned the friends to different teams. The coach's plan was to showcase his diamond, Jorge, to the knowledgeable audience. The guests watched the match with enthusiasm and cheered for Jorge's team. "Giorgio, that boy is a real talent." "How old is he?" "He's only 14, still a bit young for the junior team." That's why rules are made to be broken. Sometimes it's possible, and even necessary, to make exceptions. He's already built like a 16-year-old. They all grow so fast these days, like broiler chickens. That's a good thing. Can we talk to him? Of course. And that player, number 11, I would put him in defense or even take him off the field altogether. He's weak and fusses around a lot, even though he plays decently for amateur hockey. Silvio didn't hear what people were saying about his abilities, but he noticed that the main guest took Jorge with him from the locker room. Envy had long settled in the teenager's soul, but he skillfully hid this feeling, and this time he couldn't hold back. "Well, that's it, it's all over now. Jorge will put on airs too much." Roberto looked at the boy contemptuously. "Jorge deserves it. He's a great striker. You should be happy for your friend, Silvio, but you make ridiculous jokes instead. Do you envy me? Remember, this disease can't be cured and it always ends badly." Soon Jorge's life changed dramatically. He was enrolled in the junior team despite his age. He also had to change his high school to a school for aspiring athletes. Since the training schedule became more intense, the family had to move to the capital. Xavier was proud of his son, but his life was overshadowed by the fact that he hardly saw him. However, one day he managed to find time to attend one of Jorge's training sessions. He was very surprised when he recognized Silvio among the team players. In the evening he asked his son, "I see your friend is keeping up with you." For some reason, Jorge was embarrassed by this remark. "Sort of. He's trying, so the coach decided to keep him as a substitute, but he's not selected for serious tournaments." Doesn't he feel offended by such selective treatment? Jorge looked at his father strangely again. There's no room for offense and relationship issues in professional sports. You have to defend the team's honor here. Is that what your Giorgio says? The boy laughed. "Dad, I have a different coach now, but he's not one to hold his tongue either. He's always joking. And Giorgio visits us often, he cares about us a lot, says we're like his own children. It's good when you meet people like your Giorgio in your life. Alejandro is our new coach, he's a decent guy, but Silvio doesn't like him. I wonder what Silvio doesn't like about the new coach." "Dad, it's obvious. Giorgio used to go easy on Silvio, but Alex pushes him like a dog on the field. Of course, Silvio doesn't like that and gets mad at everyone. He himself said that in sports, the strongest wins." "Son, why do you guys call the coach Alex? Is this okay with him?" "He wanted us to. I'm the youngest on the team, and all the other guys are older than me, many of them are in college. By the way, Alejandro is also a student, he's only 28. He switched to coaching after an injury, but he can't come to terms with it. Well, training future champions is also an honorable job." Jorge laughed, but this time his laughter was light, indicating that he was also happy. "Dad, you're having an interesting conversation today, as if you've memorized newspaper headlines in advance." "Sorry, son, our generation was raised on different ideals. And we, in our time, sincerely believed in an apple tree on Mars, and in world peace, and in many other things." Jorge often hinted to his father about different perceptions of the world, but Xavier never took offense at such remarks. He was pleased that his son was trying to understand him, not mocking his old-fashioned views. In turn, the businessman also always listened attentively to the boy, which helped him see the world through his son's eyes. Perhaps this was the strong foundation for their true friendship. Jorge had no secrets from his father, and Xavier also tried to reciprocate, but a huge black cat once ran between them, and its shadow remained for the rest of their lives, with Silvio being the culprit. Jorge's success in sports didn't go unnoticed. He was invited to various TV shows and gave interviews. Numerous fans from different parts of the country sent him passionate letters. Silvio was openly envious of his friend's popularity. "Jorge, it's time for you to hold auditions. So many beautiful girls are hanging around you. Do you think I like this? But I should respect my fans. If I were in your shoes, I would do things differently." "Interesting, then give me some advice." "I would organize some tricky contest for them, and the one who wins would be honored to spend an evening or a night with me." Jorge looked at his friend. "Silvio, I hope you're joking?" "No, I'm dead serious. Imagine how great life would be as a new girl every day, adult fees for playing, honors everywhere, flashes of cameras. Are you jealous of me?" "We're friends, Silvio. I always thought you were happy for me, but you envy me." "I didn't expect that." Silvio tried to joke, but Jorge realized that all these years he had only skillfully pretended to be a friend. After that incident, he avoided Silvio's company in every way possible, which only made him more angry. The teammates also noticed the rift that had occurred, but it was not customary in their circle to discuss such delicate topics. The situation resolved itself. One of the young hockey player's admirers was particularly persistent, and inexperienced Jorge could not resist her fanatical devotion. The girl named Ines was studying at one of the capital's universities and already considered herself the bride of the famous athlete. Although he liked Ines, Jorge still did not dare to introduce his beloved one to his father. It is unknown how their future would have turned out if it were not for Silvio's intervention. Failures on the sports field cooled the ambitious young man a bit, and he decided to try his hand in the business field, where things were going much better for Silvio. Although the former friends met rarely, he knew about the latest changes in Jorge's life, and once fate gave the envious one a chance to get revenge for his past humiliations. Through acquaintances, Silvio got a job at a solid company, but he did not know that Jorge's father was the owner of the enterprise. When the young man was sent to the main office with a report, he accidentally bumped into Xavier, who was in a hurry somewhere. Amazingly, the businessman recognized him right away. "Silvio, how are you doing?" "Hello, Xavier, I work here, just started recently." "And what about sports?" "I'm a realist, so I chose what I'm good at." "And you did the right thing. Anyway, I'm in a hurry, we'll talk more when we have a chance." Silvio decided to work on forging iron while staying at the cash register. The opportunity will come soon, as Jorge wants to get married. This news stunned the businessman, and he dropped his folder of papers in surprise. The documents scattered in different directions, and Silvio promptly rushed to collect them. Xavier thanked the young man for his help. "I really don't have time right now, but I'll be free in 2 hours. I'll be waiting for you." "But I have to work, you know, discipline comes first." "I'll take care of it. See you in 2 hours." Silvio's soul rejoiced. He realized that Xavier was unaware of his son's romantic affairs and probably would not approve of his choice. The young intriguer understood people well, and indeed Jorge's father was surprised by the details of his son's personal life. That same evening, a serious conversation took place. "Jorge, why am I the last to know that you're getting married?" Xavier started off on a high note, so Jorge responded in kind. "I didn't know that I was obligated to report my personal affairs to you, and I'm very interested to know where this information came from. Are you spying on me? I'm your father, and I care about the life of my own son. Even if I have to watch you, I have the right to do so." "Wow, really? Dad, I respect you a lot, but you're wrong in this situation. I'm a grown-up already, and I can make decisions about my own life. And I advise you not to listen to gossip. Yes, I'm seeing a girl, but it's too early to talk about marriage yet." Xavier was somewhat reassured by it, but just in case, he decided to remove the girl his son had become involved with from the game. The businessman met Ines in person, with Silvio's help. The girl put up a bit of a fuss, but after receiving an envelope with a substantial reward, she nodded in agreement. All right, I promise that I won't be in the capital tomorrow. Inez kept her word, but before leaving, she called Jorge and told him that her mother had become seriously ill. The girl never appeared in his life again. Jorge didn't mourn Inez's sudden disappearance for long, nor did he think about the reasons for her departure, because his main goal in life was sports. To achieve something, he had to maintain good physical shape, which was impossible without intensive training. Xavier rarely saw his son and missed him very much. The only entertainment for the businessman was work. Once, at the presentation of the company's new product line, Milu Romero approached him. Their companies were competitors, so Xavier immediately became wary, sensing a catch, but Milu was in a very friendly mood. I'm happy for you, Xavier. I constantly keep track of your company's affairs. As you know, market conditions decide a lot today. The businessman didn't understand where Milu was trying to lead him, about whom many spoke negatively, but etiquette rules had to be followed and Xavier had to support the conversation. I completely agree with you, Milu, but as far as I know, your business is also growing. No, you exaggerate things. Everything is done with such difficulty. We have to adjust to our partners, and I don't like that. What to do? We all depend on circumstances and other people, but sometimes it's within our power to change the situation. It's a shame that we don't always take such a chance, either prejudices get in the way, or some other occasion. Yes, modern business is like the sea, where those who don't know how to swim drown quickly. Milu's face lit up. He understood that his speech, filled with hints, had achieved its goal. Xavier had already figured out the old fox from the second move, but he pretended not to understand, so that Milu would reveal even more. Milu took 2 glasses of champagne from the tray. I propose a toast to professionals. I must admit, it's always a pleasure for me to see a worthy opponent, and in those moments, for some reason, I feel like flipping the chessboard. Would you like to start a new game or do something else? Something else. I'm always up for useful alliances. Xavier, I think we have something to discuss, if you don't mind. I don't mind, Milu, but you understand that players on the same team should keep their cards open for their partner. I understand, and I guarantee you my honesty. By the way, I've been meaning to ask you, how is your son? His portraits are all over the newspapers. I heard he's playing for a foreign team now. Yes, he signed a 2-year contract with a Finnish team, but other clubs were also interested in him. But the Finns offered more? I don't know the details, but I assumed that was the case. You see, dear Xavier, business interferes even in sports. But I think it's fair when a person wants to turn their achievements into money, because athletes sacrifice the most important things, their health, personal life, and many other benefits. Believe me, I know this field well, because I've been in it with my son since he was 6. Although I have a daughter, she doesn't let my wife and me relax. The girl is so spoiled and stubborn that nothing can persuade her. The topic of children immediately brought 2 businessmen closer, and soon they began to consider a plan to merge their 2 companies into one entity. The final stage of the deal took place just before New Year's Eve, and the partners decided to celebrate this event together. Jorge was very surprised when his father told him they would be spending New Year's Eve at Milu's place. Dad, but I had completely different plans, and I think it's inappropriate for me to tag along on my father at my age. Jorge, you've become unbearable lately. I'm just asking you. Okay, if it's so important to you, I'll endure a little. Although I was planning to celebrate with my friends, we haven't seen each other in ages, and now such an opportunity has come up. You'll have plenty of time to meet with your friends. Oh, by the way, Silvio works for me. I know. He's a very promising young man. I'm happy for him. Jorge's mood spoiled quickly after his father mentioned his old friend. Many times he caught himself thinking that his old friend was intentionally or unintentionally interfering in his life. Milu's house made a strong impression on Jorge. Although he was accustomed to a carefree life, his father's new companion was clearly a fan of luxurious living. The shine and sparkles soon became overwhelming for the young man, but it was just the beginning of the struggle. When he saw Adriana, Milu's daughter, he was completely lost in space. Unlike her mother, who shone like a Christmas tree, the girl was dressed modestly, but it was of very expensive simplicity. It was not surprising to Adriana that her appearance made such a strong impression on Jorge. She was used to being in the spotlight and immediately set out to conquer another man's heart. "I've been dreaming of meeting you. Unfortunately, there are no real champions among my friends," she said. The boy responded with a compliment. "Among my acquaintances, there is no such beautiful girl like you. You look like a stranger from a painting by a famous artist." "Leonardo da Vinci?" she asked. "Oh, are you interested in painting?" he replied. "Not exactly. Many people have told me about the resemblance to a lady who once struck the artist. Of course, I am not a stranger to it, but it is very pleasant to be similar to famous personalities. I think it's much nicer to do something yourself that will make people remember you," he said. "It's easy for you to say. People write and talk about you, while I'm just an ordinary girl and I don't have any special talents. Do you dream of fame?" "Well, who doesn't dream of it? You know, popularity is more of a burden than a benefit. When you're in the spotlight, every move you make can be misunderstood, but the saddest thing is that fame is fleeting. It's like a gilded cage that eventually falls away, and those who were once surrounded by it are left forgotten." Adriana looked at Jorge with wide eyes. "You surprise me. I always thought that sports were just about brute strength." The young man laughed. "That's a common misconception, but even in sports that rely on pure strength, you have to use your brain, not to mention hockey." Jorge passionately explained the strategy of the game to Adriana, and she listened to him with bated breath. Her parents watched the young couple with love, and Milu even shed a tear. "What a beautiful couple, and they've already found common ground. I hardly recognize my daughter." The host's voice was so sincere that Xavier believed him. He didn't know that the night before, Milu had prepared his daughter for this meeting. At first, Adriana was outraged at the idea of sacrificing her freedom for her father's business, but when her strict parent threatened to cut off her financial support, she gave in. And when she saw Jorge, she was absolutely smitten. Seizing the opportunity, Adriana whispered to her father, "Daddy, thank you. This hockey player is a real cutie." "He's a man, and you're referring to him as a cutie." "It doesn't matter. For the record, daughter, this guy is not only good looking, but he's also worth a lot of money, and the best hockey clubs in the world are fighting for him." Adriana understood that she had to fight for her happiness, but she didn't have to fend off hundreds of admirers because Jorge gave in to her. After 2 weeks of daily meetings, they had become so close that they didn't want to part. Adriana looked at Jorge with loving eyes and whispered, "Now I understand what true love is. Jorge, we were made for each other. I also realized at the moment I saw you, but I have another training camp and a big game coming up. I would love to cancel everything, but I can't break the contract. Will you be punished?" Jorge jokingly rolled his eyes. "You have no idea what awaits me in that case. I would have to pay a huge penalty. What if someone gets sick? For example, if there's a serious injury, because in hockey, you have those sticks and pucks, everything is very tough. Even illness is not a mitigating circumstance. Of course, the conditions are softer here in the homeland, but the life of a legionnaire is not so comfortable. I don't understand why someone would agree to play for a foreign club. It's sad to admit it, but for an athlete, money is not as important as prestige. Although money is also a significant factor, the opportunity to play for a famous team is a real thrill, so we try not to pay attention to injuries." "Have you had such cases often?" "I wouldn't say often, but it happened before. Even when I was in juniors, I seriously injured my knee, and otherwise, it's just minor injuries like bruises from falling, or one of my teammates accidentally hitting me with a stick. I didn't think it was that dangerous. Big sports are not for the weak, and you're right to notice that it's a risky activity." Jorge was touched that Adriana was interested in his affairs and genuinely cared about him. He realized that he dreamed of her always being by his side. The parents of the lovers welcomed their decision to become one family with delight. The wedding was noisy and crowded, and the media wrote about the lavish ceremony. Disappointed fans desperately envied the famous athlete's chosen one, but the honeymoon was short-lived, and it turned out that both of them were not ready for family life, or rather, they had their own idea of it. Adriana, accustomed to a luxurious life, began to express she wasn't satisfied. She didn't like that her husband was constantly at training camps, but at the same time, her comfortable existence required a lot of money. For this reason, Jorge had to sign a new contract after the end of one, but he, too, was not satisfied with the idle life of his young spouse. Rumors started to reach him that Adriana was having a blast while he was away. The situation escalated, and one day it resulted in a loud scandal. Jorge was the first to express his dissatisfaction. "Adriana, we have been married for 3 years now. It's time to think about having a child." The young woman bristled as if a snake had bitten her. "To have children, you need to provide for their future first." "Adriana, for God's sake, isn't it enough that I'm earning money?" The woman laughed hysterically. "Can this miserable money that you bring be enough? I think you could earn much more if it weren't for your modesty." "What do you mean?" "It's simple. You need to increase your rates, but you agree to sweat for someone else's team for pennies." "Adriana, you amaze me. If my earnings look like pennies to you, then what amount do you think is appropriate? Don't you have too high expectations? Maybe it's time to lower your appetite a bit, especially since I won't be playing with a stick forever. I'm almost 30, and I'll have to leave to the big sport soon." The woman stormed around the room in indignation. "And you're still talking about children. If we have a family, it goes without saying. I'll switch to coaching, and we'll live like everyone else." "But I don't want to be like everyone else, and I'm not going to give a birth in poverty either," said Adriana, her outburst of emotion so strong that she couldn't help but cry like a schoolgirl. Jorge didn't try to calm his wife down as he had done in the past. Instead, he left the house and spent the whole day at the sports school where he had once started his career in professional sports. Giorgio was delighted to see his former student, and they talked for a long time about sports and life in general. Afterwards, Jorge suggested that Giorgio give him a ride home, and he agreed. For almost the entire journey, the old coach remained silent, and only when they arrived at Jorge's house did he sadly remark, "I was very happy to see you. Thank you for not forgetting me, but I don't like the way you look. Jorge, you look very tired, like a lemon that's been squeezed dry. Leave now, before it's too late. You can't go out on the ice in such a mood." Jorge himself felt that he was not in the best shape, but he couldn't leave because of his contract. 2 more years to endure. "It's okay, I'll make it, and then I'll give up my career." But fate had other plans. Just as he was settling into his new team, Jorge began to experience health problems. At first his hands started shaking, then weakness in his legs set in. He attributed it all to overwork and didn't tell the team doctor anything, but when his vision began to blur, he realized that it was serious. For a while, he managed to hide his poor health, but during a crucial match, all the symptoms worsened and Jorge couldn't play at full strength. After the game, he had to listen to a lot of hurtful words directed at him, and the captain warned him, "One more stunt like that and you're out of the team." Jorge tried to explain that he wasn't feeling well, but the captain didn't care. "I don't give a damn about your problems. They paid big money for you," he said. Jorge turned to the team doctor for help. The doctor examined him for a long time, shaking his head. "Your situation is bad, Manuel," he said. "I'm Jorge," Jorge corrected him. "Doesn't matter, but you need to sound the alarm," the doctor replied. "I can't tell just by looking at you, but if you don't start treatment right now, things will end very badly." "That's why I came to you, Doc," Jorge said. "Just give me some pills, I'll take them. I can't quit now." The doctor nodded understandingly, his bald head covered by a narrow, brightly patterned cap. "I understand you'll have to pay the penalty." "That's right, Doc, you know how much my boss will overcharge me." The doctor dug around in his safe for a long time, then pulled out a pill bottle. "Here you go, Manuel, but no more than 1 tablet a day, understood?" "Why do you call everyone Manuel?" Jorge asked. The doctor shook his head again. I don't know, it's easier. For a while, the pills helped a lot. Jorge felt a surge of energy and played aggressively on the field, but the period of improvement didn't last long. So he decided to double the dose himself, but even that didn't help. One day, during a match, Jorge's legs refused to obey him, and he fell to the ice and couldn't get up. He was in the hospital for only a few days, but since the treatment was expensive, he had to continue it back home. Xavier was shocked when he heard about his son's troubles. He arranged for Jorge to be treated at one of the best clinics in the capital, and within a few days he learned that he had multiple sclerosis. The treating doctor spoke of the terrible disease as if it were commonplace. I'm sorry, my friend, but you can forget about sports forever. Right now, the most important thing is to maintain your quality of life. Jorge had never heard this term before, so he asked the doctor to explain further. The doctor adjusted his glasses and patiently explained. I don't want to scare you, but the test results showed that pathological processes have been going on in your body for a long time. Perhaps a trauma was the cause, as often happens with athletes, or the disease was run in families to you. That's impossible. Everyone in my family is strong and healthy. My father toughened me up and taught me sports since I was a baby. That's good, of course, but no one is saved from diseases. We doctors get sick too, unfortunately. But it's not all hopeless, as it may seem at first glance. People with your diagnosis can live a full life, although your case is a bit unusual, so the prognosis is not so comforting. Doctor, I don't understand you. First you say I'm almost healthy, then you predict something incomprehensible. Jorge, don't get ahead of yourself. We'll keep an eye on you. Giving hasty predictions is the most thankless job. Jorge spent almost a month in the clinic, but the improvement after the treatment was short-lived. He had to move in with his father because Adriana, seeing him in a helpless state, was horrified. Lord, and why all of this to me? What about the children, Jorge, when you yourself need outside help? Thank you, wife, for your support, although I didn't expect anything else from you. Of course, don't you dare judge me because I warned you right away that performing heroic deeds was not in my plans. I don't need anything from you anymore. It's just a pity that I didn't see how carefree you are, and I thought you were a human being. Are you insulting me at my own home? Don't worry, Adriana, I won't show up here again. Jorge moved in with his father and soon received a message that a case had been filed against him. The reason for the legal proceedings was non-compliance with the contract terms. The compensation amount was several times higher than his fee, but Xavier paid it all in full. I don't want you to be dragged through the courts in this condition. Thank you, Dad. I have to get out of this trap. Definitely, it can't be any other way. You can always count on my help. Jorge gradually began to adapt to his new life, but Adriana ruined everything. Just before New Year's, she came to the country estate to start another scandal with her husband. Xavier was absent at the time, but Flora witnessed the unpleasant scene. Adriana attacked Jorge right from the doorstep, ignoring his condition. You've settled in comfortably, a nice house, servants, and, in addition to decorations, a wheelchair picture perfect. Jorge tried to stay calm. Do you find my helpless situation funny? Well, why so I should be crying and moaning instead, right? Adriana, just tell me straight, why did you come here? Do you have the nerve to ask me that? You left me without any support. Okay, I understand, you need money. Exactly. I'm sorry, but I can't help you with that. As you can see, I'm not in the best position myself, and you should think about getting a job or let Dad support you. It's not up to you to decide. Adriana gathered her strength to express her final demand. Jorge, you can still have me back, but you need money for that, right? The woman nodded in agreement, unaware of the trick in his question. Jorge rolled his wheelchair closer to her, and she nervously backed away. Adriana, I have a counter-proposal for you. You can also have me back if you agree to move into this house for a while and help my father a bit. There was no other way to retreat, and the woman backed against the wall. Are you just offering me to become your caregiver like that? But you are my wife, not a stranger. Oh no, I can't do it. I'm not ready for this. Flora saw Adriana storm out of Jorge's room. As she ran past the housekeeper, she couldn't hold back. What a bitch, a real doll. Adriana turned around. Are you talking to me? To you, and who else? The visitor screamed hysterically. A house of freaks, and how did I not see it right away? Flora opened the front doors wide. Get out of here, madam, and I advise you not to show up here again. Cursing her life and the residents of this house, Adriana got into her car and sped off towards the gates. Flora crossed herself 3 times as if trying to protect the house and herself from the crazy guest. Contrary to the positive statements of the attending physician, Jorge's condition was rapidly deteriorating. The athlete's weakened body and stresses played a cruel joke on him. He caught a cold from somewhere. For 3 days, he burned with fever, and the doctor who came on call shrugged his shoulders. I have to disappoint you, but things are bad. Besides the main illness, there's also a cold. And where could he have caught it? Jorge answered the doctor's question himself. A couple of days ago, my friends came to visit me. Just in time, it's the flu season. So should I just become a hermit and hide away? If you want to preserve the health you have left, you have to make sacrifices. Doctor, my life for the past few months has been nothing but sacrifice. Tell me, then, what's the point of living? The doctor didn't answer that question and quickly left the room. Xavier offered to escort him out. Doctor, I'm at my wit's end. Please advise us on what to do. My son has seen the best doctors and professors, but he's still in the same condition. The local doctor squinted his eyes. Well, I may not be a professor, but I'll tell you this, it all depends on the patient's own willingness. Your son either doesn't want to get better or isn't motivated to do so. What should we do then? You need to motivate him. He's an athlete, right? Yes. Well, people like him are driven by success, and your son needs to be motivated by that too. But how to achieve that is up to you. My experience shows that even a small success can work wonders. Keep him busy, don't give him a moment of free time, so he can't sink into his gloomy thoughts. If I were in your shoes, I would hire a caregiver, preferably a young and attractive woman. Does age and gender matter? Absolutely, because a young man, even a sick one, won't want to show his weakness to a lady. Maybe I'm wrong, but it's based on my personal observations. Xavier spent the whole day pondering the doctor's strange recommendation, and in the evening, he invited Flora to his office. I'm very uncomfortable giving you these instructions. I'm afraid of being misunderstood. Xavier, don't worry, I heard everything yesterday. The doctor was speaking very loudly, so it was impossible not to hear him. And what do you think? About his proposal or the candidate for the nurse position? About both. Of course, I don't know much about medicine, but I think we should listen to our doctor's advice and at least give it a try. I think I have a candidate in mind. Xavier perked up. We should have started with that. Don't get too excited, this girl might not work out for you. Anyway, my niece Luz is a trained nurse. After school, she worked at a clinic for 4 years, but something happened there, I don't know exactly what. Long story short, she was prohibited from practicing her profession, but she can work as a nurse's aide. However, she's too proud and didn't want to accept any favors from her employer. And where is she working now? Nowhere, she's working as a courier, delivering papers, and I have to pick up the slack. Flora had long been prepared to tell her boss about her difficult life with all the details, but he impatiently interrupted her. Let your niece come tomorrow. Basically, I have no choice. If the girl worked before, then she has some experience. Yes, she even gives me massages and knows which pill to give me when my blood pressure spikes. All right, are we agreed? Of course, how can I refuse you, Xavier? You're like family to me. And I'm so worried about Jorge, he's practically grown up before my eyes. Flora lived at the other end of the village, and every day she had to walk a decent distance, but that evening she rushed home at full speed. Her heart was filled with joy because of two reasons. Firstly, the opportunity to find a job for her niece, who had been under her care almost since birth, and secondly, she could finally sort out her personal life. There was a man on her radar who was showing her attention, but he didn't have his own place, so they had to meet in secret. Flora burst into the house, almost out of breath. Luz? The niece had never seen her aunt in such a state and was scared. Aunt Flora, what's wrong with you? Did something happen? Something did happen, Luz. I found a job for you, a well-paying one. The girl's face turned red. Are you joking? I'm not joking. It may not be your ideal position, but beggars can't be choosers. Luz started to badger her aunt. Why are you speaking in riddles? Are you trying to torture me? Let me catch my breath first, and then I'll tell you everything. I've already made dinner. They just paid me today. And how much did they pay? The girl reluctantly said. 300s. Yes, they don't pay well for your services, but don't worry, you'll be rolling like cheese in butter soon enough. Flora had expected her niece to dance with joy, but instead, Luz became sad. Aunt Flora was even offended by her reaction. I ran all the way across town like a racehorse to bring you good news, and you didn't even crack a smile. Being a caregiver is a disgrace to you, I suppose. Auntie, how can you say that? Nurses only wear white coats, but sometimes they have to do such work that even a normal person would flinch. I'm not upset about the job, but what if your Xavier calls the clinic and finds out about me? Let him call. Although, I don't think he will, because my businessman is a very decent man. Why are you so afraid? You never told me what you did to upset your boss. You could at least tell me now, so I'll be in the know. I feel uncomfortable telling you about these things. Flora drew the girl close and began stroking her hair like a little child. You're silly. I'm almost your mom, so you can tell me everything. The girl straightened up like a string, and her eyes sparkled. Everything was fine until that patient appeared in our ward. His name was Rodriguez. Wait, is it that Rodriguez? That's him, Aunt Flora. But at that time he still had his job. He was fired when he got drunk and sat behind the wheel. They even showed him on TV, the jerk. He came to us earlier with a heart attack and immediately had his eyes on me. That bastard, he was 50 years old and he was after such a young lady, Luz said. He was 47 according to his passport, she corrected herself. Anyway, he started making indecent compliments to me, and then he wouldn't leave me alone. I had to ask the other girls to come with me to his room when I needed to go, because he was in a single room for treatment. And what happened next? If I find out that he hurt you, I'll take care of him myself, Flora said angrily. Luz smiled through her tears. I may look fragile, but I stood up for myself. This Rodriguez started complaining to the head nurse that I was rude to patients. Our head nurse talked to me and I promised not to do it again. Then one night, when I was alone on duty, this bastard pretended to be sick. He chose the perfect moment and I rushed into his room with the resuscitation kit, and then he knocked me down to the bed. It still makes me sick to think about it. Flora froze. Now I understand why you didn't say anything. Auntie, that's not all. I had a tray in my hands, so I hit him right in the face and then kneed him in the weakest spot. Good for you, Flora said. That's what you think. Rodriguez howled, curled up in pain, and blood flowed from his broken nose. Of course, everyone came running, but no one wanted to listen to me. They believed that bastard when he accused me of intentionally attacking him. But isn't that a criminal offense? Of course, there is such a charge as failure to fulfill job responsibilities, but the head nurse decided not to take it to court. Instead, he offered me to resign voluntarily. They ruined my work record, though. Why didn't you tell me earlier? I would have taken care of this Rodriguez, Flora said. I was just ashamed, Luz replied, and burst into tears. And tell me, where's the justice? How can someone hurt an orphan? The story of her niece made a strong impression on Flora. She cried for a long time, recalling how she raised her young niece alone. Flora and her sister were orphaned when the younger girl was just 7 years old. Flora was 12 years older than the little girl. Flora had to abandon her education and personal life for the sake of her younger sister. However, instead of gratitude, the girl brought her only grief and shame. Flora could not keep up with her sister, who fell into bad company. The girl started coming home at dawn, smelling of alcohol. Flora tried to reason with her wayward sister, who would cry and promise to change, but it all happened again. Then Andrea announced that she was going to have a child. Seeing her sister's changed expression, the future mother reassured her. "Don't worry, sister. I will give up the baby right away. What's the point for me? I'll go to the city and get a job." This revelation shocked Flora. "How can you say such a thing? People suffer for years, unable to have a child, and you have already planned to abandon your own flesh and blood." It was especially hurtful for Flora to hear such thoughts, as she had given up her own happiness for her future sister. But Andrea was not concerned about her older sister's feelings. She could hardly wait for the baby's birth and then went wild. Luz was only 5 months old when people in uniforms stormed into their house. "You need to come with us for identification," they said. Flora felt a chill inside her. "What happened?" "We told you, you need to come with us for identification. There's a chance your sister died." Flora immediately recognized Andrea by the flower tattoo on her hand. She remembers how the medical examiner expressed his condolences and then said with regret, "She should have lived. She was so young and beautiful, but the damn drinking was to blame." The woman was afraid to look at her sister's lifeless body and only asked, "Did she get poisoned? If only that was the case. Can't you see that she was beaten up?" Apparently, they drank and got into a conflict, with all the tragic consequences. Since then, Luz has been under her aunt's care, but Flora never told the girl about the circumstances of her mother's death. She did not want to traumatize the child's soul. The aunt tried to protect her niece from trouble, and until a certain point, she succeeded. Luz grew up to be an obedient girl and pleased her aunt with her success at school. It was at her suggestion that Luz entered medical college. "You're made for this profession, Luz. You are compassionate, and nurses don't do anything special, they just flutter around the wards in their white coats and give injections in the soft spot." Only later, during her internship, Luz realized how wrong her aunt was, but she was not the one who backed down from a challenge and soon grew to love her job with all her heart. In the morning, Xavier was waiting for his housekeeper on the first floor. From a distance, he noticed that Flora was accompanying a fragile girl. "She's just a child, how can she be a good caregiver?" the businessman thought. But his disappointment quickly turned into admiration. Luz politely greeted him and slowly took off her light coat. The homeowner offered, "Let me escort you to our patient." "Okay, but first I need to wash my hands." Patients who are forced to stay within 4 walls are very weak and can easily catch an infection, Luz replied. Jorge wasn't expecting guests in the morning, so he was reading a random book in bed. When Luz cautiously opened the door, he thought he was dreaming because the book described exactly the same scene. He stared into the girl's face, and she blushed with embarrassment. "Hello, Jorge," she said. "Hello, are you a fairy or a star that got lost in the sky?" Jorge asked playfully. "No, son, she's your helper, and her name is," his father interrupted. Jorge didn't notice his father and the housekeeper at first because all his attention was focused on the charming stranger. He jokingly replied to his father's remarks. "Wait, Dad, I have to guess the name of this nymph who jumped off the pages of the book I'm reading." Xavier wanted to interrupt his son, but Flora gave him such an expressive look that he stopped mid-sentence. Jorge glanced at the open page and then back at the girl. "In my story, Luz came to the hero, and he was waiting for her, and she came," he said. The girl smiled. "My name is also Luz." Impressed with this touching scene, the onlookers decided it was best to leave. Xavier whispered, "There's something magical about this girl. I didn't expect her to captivate me with just one glance, and I haven't seen Jorge in such high spirits in a long time. Maybe the doctor was right? It's too early to draw conclusions. Let's wait and see," Flora replied. The young people looked at each other in silence for a long time. Finally, Jorge broke the long pause. "Perhaps we should get to know each other better, the star named Luz," said Jorge. The girl laughed and asked, "Why do you call me that?" Jorge replied, "If you don't like it, I won't." Luz responded, "I don't mind, but know that appearances are deceptive. So are you saying that a monster is hiding beneath the guise of a blonde nymph?" "No, I don't want to scare you, but I am definitely not Cinderella. I suppose I am not a prince either, but what made you undertake the long journey to visit a reclusive hermit like me?" "No one made me, and my journey was short. I came to help you." "Well, you've ruined the whole fairy tale, but I'm still willing to obey you at least for today." "That's good because sometimes one day means much more than a whole year." Soon, both Jorge and his father realized the truth behind this statement. Luz spent entire days with Jorge, giving him massages and making him do special exercises. Daily walks were also part of the rehabilitation plan, but Luz had a lot of questions after seeing what her patient was eating. However, all the blame fell on Flora. "Auntie, don't you understand that putting so much meat on one plate is just a crime? When Jorge was involved in sports, he needed protein, but now he needs something lighter." Flora responded, "Don't shout at me. Tell me softly what he needs. Lately, all I hear from you are complaints, but what can I do? I created this problem myself." Only Xavier didn't interfere, but from the look of his son, he could tell that Luz's arrival had rekindled his desire to live. One evening, he returned home and could not believe his eyes. Jorge, leaning on a cane, was strolling along a path that ran alongside the flower garden. "Dad, you can congratulate me, but I think it's your merit because it was your idea to bring this wonderful girl into our home." Xavier replied, "You're mistaken. It was your doctor's suggestion, and I had no other choice, but it seems like you don't regret it at all." "You're right, I can hardly believe it myself now, but not long ago I really didn't want to live. Luz promised to introduce me to some doctor friend of hers, says he's a real specialist in these kinds of illnesses. Do you believe now that everything can be restored?" "I do, Father, and thank you for your patience." Whether it was faith or Luz's influence, Jorge's condition improved every day. They talked a lot, mostly about what had happened before. Jorge felt that he would never have told anyone else in his life what he was telling this fragile girl. Luz felt that something else was needed, something that would put a stop to the gloom and make him move forward. Luz was convinced that all that was needed was the desire. "Xavier, can I talk to you?" "Of course, Luz, what's wrong?" He put down his papers. Lately, all he had been doing was trying to fix his company's affairs. After he paid a huge fine for his son and then spent no less on his treatment, the firm's affairs had significantly declined. He didn't say anything to Jorge and tried to make sure that those around him didn't notice anything. "No, nothing's wrong. I'd like to ask you for a favor. I need 2 days off. I'm going to the city. A friend invited me to a wedding, and I'll be back right away." Luz didn't know how to lie. Xavier immediately understood that there was another reason, but he had no right to question the girl or express his distrust. "Okay, Luz, we'll manage, don't worry." Luz knew where she was going. Of course, she wasn't sure she would find the person she needed, but she decided to try. Strangely enough, she immediately found the building, a few questions to passers-by, a little wit, and there she was at the door. She didn't know how to pray, but she whispered, "Lord, let Alejandro be found." Yes, Luz went to another city to find the very coach that Jorge respected so much. He also spoke very warmly about the first coach, but only this one could help. She explained to the guard who exactly she needed for a long time. When he finally understood, he smiled. You should have just said Alex. Luz was surprised. But that's exactly what I said. No, you said Alejandro, but you should say Alex. She was led through some corridors until they finally opened a door and a cold draft hit her. He's over there, on that bench. Do you see him? Yes, thank you very much. Alejandro was surprised to see a fragile girl in a place where only men trained. Are you sure you're here for me? If you're the person who trained Jorge. I heard he left the sport and breached his contract. Yes, he got sick, very sick, and that's why he breached it. Come with me to my office, and you'll tell me everything, Alejandro said. Luz returned exhilarated. Alejandro promised to find out something and then come back for sure. Jorge was sitting in a chair outside. He even went for a walk today without his cane. It was a bit scary, of course. He had gotten so used to it lately, but he wanted to please Luz. Father had been missing all day, even though today was his day off, and he wasn't going to work. Strangely enough, Flora wasn't showing up either. Jorge got up and decided to go look for them. He found them in the kitchen. Flora was cooking something, and Father was sitting on the couch. It was somehow ridiculous, somewhat unusual, and Jorge couldn't think of anything better to say then. What are you guys doing here? And then Jorge noticed that his father and Flora were somewhat embarrassed. He looked at his father in surprise, then turned to their housekeeper and suddenly realized that he had never seen Flora as a woman, even though she was. Yes, she was already over 40, maybe even older, but she was a very interesting, slim, albeit large, woman with brown eyes. Jorge hurriedly left the kitchen, and Xavier thought, everything is all mixed up. Before Luz appeared, I had no idea that Flora was not only kind and intelligent, but also beautiful. He couldn't explain what Luz had to do with it, but it didn't matter. 3 days after Luz's return, something happened that Jorge didn't even dream of seeing in his sleep. They had just sat down to drink tea in the yard when the security guard came. Jorge, someone came to see you. To me, who? He said it's Alex. Alex? Jorge looked at Luz, but she was talking to her aunt, so he got up and went to the gate. Well, hello, Jorge, I see you're doing great. Alex wasn't alone, Giorgio was with him. What are you doing here? I'm so glad to see you. Well, will you invite us into the house? Of course, come in. They drank tea for a long time, talked about nothing in particular, admired the pastries and flowers, and then everyone left, leaving Jorge with the coaches. So Jorge, how are you? Alejandro asked. Well, it's been better, Jorge replied. That's good that you're staying positive, very good. I have an offer for you. Alejandro explained that such a high-class hockey player could be much more beneficial to the community by training children, and perhaps even adults, but first, he needed to get back on the ice. Giorgio would help him with that, while Alex would take care of advertising. Jorge sat there in disbelief. When they said their goodbyes, Jorge asked, Where are you from? How did you even think to come here? I haven't told anyone about my illness. Alex smirked. Take care of your Luz, she's wonderful. Jorge smiled. Yes, it was Luz, and he finally realized it. All night he had thought about how he would tell Luz everything, but then he decided not to rush it. As he started earning money again, he would propose to her. 2 months later, they saw the first sports advertisement about Jorge's return to train new champions. The next day, when he and Luz were getting ready to go for a walk, the doors opened and Adriana appeared in the doorway. Jorge, my dear, I missed you so much, she said. Jorge was taken aback, and before he could push her away, she embraced him and kissed him. Luz immediately stepped back and then left the room entirely. Finally, Jorge pushed Adriana away. What do you want? Why did you come? Well, you know, we all make mistakes. I told you, I'm not a caregiver, I'm a wife. You're independent now, and soon you'll start earning money. I think we can be together again. Are you happy? I see that you are. She sat down on the couch, crossing her legs, and Jorge stared at her in amazement. Adriana, what about Silvio? He turned out to be a jerk. Did he kick you out? Well, kind of. He suggested that I get a job. Can you imagine? No, I can't even imagine that. But don't linger, you still have to get to the city. Adriana narrowed her eyes. Are you kicking me out? Exactly, and I really want to never see you again in my life. Adriana realized that her hopes of Jorge crying with joy were not fulfilled. She tried a different approach. Tears quickly welled up in her eyes. Jorge, honey, everyone makes mistakes. I'm not an exception. I can't live without you, you understand? Jorge laughed. I had already forgotten what a great actress you are. Leave, Adriana, and don't ever come back into my life. The woman jumped up just as Xavier entered the room. You will regret this. Very soon you will regret this. And my father will crush your father. Got it? She grabbed her suitcase and proudly walked past Xavier. As soon as the door slammed shut, he turned to his son. Jorge, what was that? I'm afraid, Dad, that it's another problem. Jorge was right. 3 days later, Milu told Xavier that she wanted to divide their company. Milu, you know that this would be the death for me and my company right now. Of course I understand, Xavier, that's why I'm doing it. I become the sole entrepreneur in this area and fulfill my daughter's request. What do the children have to do with it? Especially since you know that it was Adriana who left Jorge when he got sick. Yes, you're right, young people make mistakes, but they need to be forgiven. You know what, Milu, why don't you all together with your families go and... Milu's eyes widened, but Xavier had already left. They sat in the courtyard under the old apple tree, all together, Jorge, Luz, Flora, and Xavier. Papers lay in front of Xavier. What are we going to do? Dad, maybe I could try to borrow some money? No, Jorge, let's think logically. You haven't even started working yet, and nobody knows how it will go. Besides, to borrow such a sum, you would have to rob a bank. Is it all so sad? Well, it's a crash. If we sell this house, the apartment in the city, and the leftovers that Milu will leave us after withdrawing her assets, then we have a chance to break even. Jorge whistled, and Flora said out of habit, Don't whistle, there won't be any money. Everyone turned to her, and the woman realized that she had said something foolish and got up. I'll make tea. She was about to leave when a beautiful woman approached the table. They had been living without daytime security for several days now. Hello. Xavier looked up and said, Natalia? Jorge looked at his mother without taking his eyes off her. He thought he would never know her in his life, but no, he recognized her right away. Hello, Xavier. Hello, son. Jorge remained silent, and Xavier stood up and pushed his chair back. Well, sit down since you're here. What happened? Or did you also decide to ruin our lives? To finish us off, so to speak. The woman looked surprised at her ex-husband. Xavier, what's wrong with you? You never gave up before. She paused for a few minutes, collecting her thoughts. I came back to our homeland on some business, just for a short while. I met one of our mutual acquaintances, we talked. I had no idea about Jorge and what's happening with you now. Well, I'm not surprised. Jorge turned away. Jorge, please hear me out. I understand what you think of me, but I don't think it would be better for me to stay. My soul would still be elsewhere. And I would hate you because you didn't let me fulfill my dream, but that's not the point. Our mutual friend told me everything. As I understand it, now your top priority is to save the company. Xavier nodded. Yes, but I don't think we can do it. We will succeed. We must succeed. My husband died, leaving me a very wealthy widow. Besides, I did some useful things for that country, and they pay me very well. Now, as the clock is ticking, I realize that I'm terribly lonely. I perfectly understand how Jorge feels about me, and I wouldn't have come to you. I want to help. I understand that your pride won't allow you to accept money from me. Xavier, can we consider it as alimony for Jorge's whole life? I'm not buying your forgiveness. I'm used to it. Let there be at least something. She put the envelope on the table, stood up, and headed towards the exit. Jorge couldn't hold it in any longer. Mom. She stopped and turned around. Stay with us at least a couple of days. Maybe we can make it work. Xavier was proud of Jorge, and Luz was too. Later that day, Natalia heard sobs while walking through the garden. She carefully pushed aside the bushes and saw Flora quietly crying in the corner of the garden. The woman smiled and walked up to her. Flora jumped up in fear. Please don't leave, sit down. Flora sat down obediently. I know why you're crying. Is it because of Xavier? Because I came? At first, Flora shook her head negatively, but then she waved her hand and began to speak. You know, we've been together for so many years, but we never looked at each other as a man and a woman? Yes, that's right. And now I don't know what's happening. I broke up with the man I was going to marry. I'm going crazy. That's not true, and Xavier loves you too. I saw the way he looked at you. You think so? But why are you telling me this? Natalia smiled. Maybe because I don't love Xavier and never have, not like my second husband. Don't get the wrong idea, I didn't come here for that. Adriana paced around her father's table. Dad, come on, almost there? Another 20 minutes, you know it's not instant. Look, see how his company stocks dropped by 1 point. Just one? But you said they would fall and you'd get the company for a bargain. I did say that. But I don't know what's happening. He shouldn't have any money left. No bank will give him a loan. I took care of that. Adriana slumped onto the couch and turned on the TV. Milu also lifted his head and stared at the screen with surprise. A beautiful young TV presenter talked about the big changes and expansions happening at Xavier's enterprise. Xavier, can you tell us, it seems like you have everything, you've achieved so much, but why did you decide to move forward? It's really quite simple, you see, I realized, at any age, you can start over. My son made a turn, now he's a coach, soon he'll be getting married and there will be a new addition to the family. And me, I'm getting married soon too, and I'll have a new family member, a grandchild. So why should business stand still? We will grow and develop, like our big, close-knit family. Adriana jumped up. I hate him, I hate him. Her father looked tense at the computer. What is it? Adriana ran to him. What? Our stocks are dropping, someone's buying them up very quickly, and I think I know who. Damn it, he's outsmarted me again. Milu slammed the laptop shut with such force that he broke the laptop lid. Adriana looked at him in fear. What's wrong? Why are you staring? Go find a job, soon we'll be begging around the world. Adriana burst into tears, and Milu cursed again. Before the wedding, Jorge had only one unfinished business. They stopped at the hospital where Luz was doing her internship. Why are we here? We need to be. They entered the hospital, and Jorge literally dragged her behind him. Finally, they found the right door, pushed it open, and a man with a bald head and a long nose stood up to meet them. Jorge looked at Luz. Is this him? She nodded, and Jorge punched him in the nose with great pleasure. There, now it's all done.